Hello, everybody. Welcome back for another episode of the Stokes Sound Podcast. I'm your host, Ed Stokes, and joined with me today is the absolute incredible mixing engineer, Matthew Weiss. Matthew, how are you doing?
Doing fantastic. Very, very happy to be on with you. Finally.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. I've heard your mixes, and obviously you're very, very good. And one thing that kind of really struck me when I was kind of checking out all your stuff is all of your YouTube channel stuff, and you've got an incredible YouTube channel, Weiss Advice. Absolutely love it. And anybody that's listening to this podcast, make sure you do go and check out his YouTube channel. We will obviously get into this more and more as we go through the episode, but I just wanted to shout that out at the start because as a mixer myself, I'm always looking at other mixers, their techniques, and kind of implementing that into my techniques, and try and, I guess, better ourselves. And it's a really great way of doing it. And your YouTube channel kind of really shows that. So it's fantastic. But before we get into that, Matt, do you want to give yourself a little bit of an introduction? I'm sure a lot of people will know who you are, but if you want to just give us a little bit of an introduction, that would be fantastic.
I wouldn't go assuming that anybody would necessarily know who I am. I think the concept of celebrity engineer is extremely flawed. So I'll give the quick rundown. So I'm Matthew Weiss. I specialize both in audio engineering education. I'm also the engineer for, many people, but primarily Acon and Convict Music. I've got accolades. So a couple Grammy nominations, multi-platinum awarded, and now a couple gold records as well. So that makes me pretty cool, I think.
Incredible.
So that's the rundown.
Fantastic. So kind of what I wanted to kind of get you onto this episode, because I know a lot of, mixing engineers, will be listening to this, and, people, like I said earlier, about people kind of really like to know other people's workflows and techniques. And I've heard your stuff, and I really kind of, what really resonates with me in a lot of your work is your kind of the vocal production side of it, and how amazing you get your vocals to sound. And I think, as we both know, vocals is the most important thing in a record, especially in a lot of the pop stuff, R&B, all of that kind of stuff. The vocal really sits there. And I'd quite like to get into that, if you don't mind, a little bit about your kind of process in, how you approach vocals when you get them from producers to mix, or if you're recording them yourself. Would you be able to kind of talk us through kind of the start of how you go about your vocal process in any kind of mix? Obviously it will change from time to time, but just like an overview. That'd be
sure.
Really cool.
Do you want to talk tracking, like actual vocal producing from the tracking phase, or do you want to talk mixing?
Let's go, if we can go from the start, actually, vocal tracking, actually, because obviously that does help going into the mixing side if it's tracked correctly. So if we can go kind of from your start of tracking and then talk a little bit about your mixing side of it as well, that would be, incredible.
Yeah, so when I'm vocal tracking, the job of a vocal producer is to take responsibility for the presentation of the vocal. A producer is the one who creates the product, right? So a vocal producer is responsible for understanding what an artist's sound is supposed to be and making sure that it gets there. For me, when it comes to the technical side of it, this starts with mic selection. I tend to, generally speaking, if I'm working with somebody I'm not familiar with, I go with the opposite rule. So the opposite rule is to say, if somebody has a dark bassy voice, you want to put a bright shiny mic on them. So something like a U87, which would pull the front of face tones forward, or a Manley Reference C, which is going to pinch that 2.5K. If you have a very round, smooth voice, that extra bit of bite, it helps. Conversely, if you have a voice like mine, where it's particularly nasal, you do not want to use a U87 or a Manley Reference C. You would want to use something like a Circle Audio 251, which is one of my favorite mics ever. And that does the opposite. It smooths out that 2.5 range that makes people sound bitey and harsh, and it lifts the top, gives a nice kind of round saturation in the lows and low mids, so it forms a nice little bed around those nasal tones and makes us sound not like we have a cold. So I'm airing the mic, and then in terms of preamps, I'm not quite as particular. I tend to like Neve stuff, but that's really just because I've never questioned it so much before. There's fantastic preamps all over the place. TubeTech makes a really great clean one. DW Fern has a really excellent one.
Are you on Neve 1073? Is that the preamp you talk
Neve
about?
1073 is a classic, but then there's also your Neve 1081, your Neve 1064, 1084, all those kinds of things. Yeah. And they all sound good. They all sound a little different. They all act a little different. Personality is a little different. But in my opinion, any solid, good preamp is probably going to work. And then the third part of the equation, which is certainly not the last, is the actual space itself. The space is important for two reasons, not just the sound, but also the feel that the artist is getting. I'm not a fan of booths. I think that booths generally do not sound good. It's very hard to acoustically construct a booth. Most people think that it's just a closet with foam. It is not. There's a lot that goes into building a proper ISO booth. There are a few good ones, but even the best ones tend to sound a little bit like they're non-existent. I prefer going into a live room and setting up what's called gobos, which is where you've probably seen it, where there's the microphone, the vocalist, and then behind them are these big baffles. That provides the acoustic damping that is needed to track a tight vocal in a live room. And I find that sounds the best. But a lot of the times I actually like to track in the control room because it allows me to interface with the artist very quickly and easily. And while technically the sound might not be the best in the control room for tracking, it's going to be good enough where the actual workflow is the benefits of that are going to overshadow whatever little compromises are being made in the sound. Now, in terms of the actual production, that's a psychology trick, right? Everybody hears differently, everybody thinks differently, but there's a couple of things that are really, really important. The number one is you want to get the artist to the point where they are not aware of themselves. That's really important. The best singing is done when there's no kind of inhibition. So you need to be as transparent and silent as possible. I think the number one mistake people make is overcoaching, right? You need to know how to do everything, but say the least in order to get the artist to not be in their head. If the artist is in their head, a really good trick is to get them to teach you the song, right? So they're no longer thinking about their own performance of it. They're thinking about your performance of it. So these little psychological tricks to get the best performance, to me, that's actually the biggest challenge, and it requires the most amount of skill, and it ultimately is what's going to yield the best results. Then we get into the technical shit, which is being able to move very fast through whatever DAW you're using, Pro Tools, right?
Yeah.
Nudging things in time very quickly, creating quick comps. And there's all sorts of techniques and stuff for that. So this has been already very rambly, but
do you know, it's so interesting you mentioned about the psychology of it, because I feel like a lot of people kind of miss that part out. You know, they think about, oh, we need to use a £10,000 Sony C800 mic and this preamp, and I'm going to get an Acon kind of sound. And it's just like, well, you're just not. It's all about the other parts of it. And I'm just so happy you mentioned about the psychology, because everybody that's listening to this, like, it is such a big part in the recording world of kind of not having an ego, letting the singer do their thing, and then trying to track that. I mean, when it comes down to kind of touching upon your psychology aspect of it, do you find that when you kind of set up in the studio the mic with the singer, how long of that process are you kind of going through before you feel like you're getting some good takes? Is it like a long kind of process for you, or do you find it quite quick?
It depends on the artist.
Yeah.
There are some artists where the first take is the most important one, because that's where all of the mistakes happen in the right ways. So I always try to save the first take. Some artists require getting into it a little bit. Khan specifically usually goes through a couple of takes before he really catches his flow for it. Andre 3000, kind of the same way. He sort of writes his delivery, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So he'll experiment with takes until he kind of finds the vibe that he wants. But once he finds it, it's like one take and he's good from there. But some artists, they just walk in. I remember the Becky G sessions. She would just walk in and do it. And I was like, whoa, holy crap.
That must be nice.
I mean, it was almost disarming, because I wasn't really used to that speed of process. And so I reacted to it. I was like, okay, bam, boom, there it is,
ready for it.
But I try and be as quick as possible. But one thing that I actually did notice, and this is something that one of my clients who's a little bit greener pointed out, was that I would move so fast that she would become intimidated about keeping up with me, and I realized, oh, it's not just about being fast, it's also about being very transparent.
Yeah.
So very psychological.
So when you if you were to get then into more of the technical side of it, obviously, assuming that, when you're recording at that level, you're going to be good at Pro Tools, or whatever DAW you're using. What kind of things are you doing in a technical way to increase kind of the speed and the, when you're doing the playlisting, the comps, doing are you doing like a comp and a playlist while you're tracking another new take? You kind of doing all of that kind of stuff in the process? Kind of what's kind of your workflow in that aspect of it?
Yeah, so I multitask as much as I can, although it's
Yeah.
more important to be focused on the artist's performance. But I can kind of get my brain to work in a way where I can be doing very rote things while paying attention to the artistic things. So for me, a lot of it is about having a really solid recording template.
Yeah.
Um, in Pro Tools, the way I like to do it is with record arm tracks, dedicated record tracks,
Okay.
and then what I would call dump tracks, which is where you start dumping the comps. So every take is being dry recorded to the record track and playlisted there. But as the takes are coming in and becoming the things that I want them to be, I'm just quickly doing. Actually, I program my own macro, so it's Option Command C. So I'll highlight Option Command C, and that will move it down, or I'll do
Yeah.
highlight Option Command V, and that will move it down to
Right.
copying
Okay.
the take that was just done and moving it down below. But I mean, if you're doing it manually, it's actually the fastest way is to do it with a mouse and hold down Option Command. Yeah, Command 4 Option and then
Yeah.
drag so
Yeah.
that
When
it
you say it, you
copies.
forget it, don't you?
Yeah,
You
it's
just
easier.
know it.
But so that's what I mean about those root functions is that
Yeah.
it's easier
Yeah.
for me to do it in my hands than it is for me to think what it is.
Yeah.
And then I segment everything very carefully. So I'll have all of my instrumental work all the way at the top,
Yeah.
and then all the vocal stuff, which is taking up the body of the Pro Tools session. I have that going down to the master, and I have lots of submixes, delays, things that are very low latency
Yeah.
already set up just so that I can be triggering delay throws and things like that. And it almost becomes a performance for me too. Um, Extreme amount of caffeine sometimes helps as well.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Do you are you tracking, because I know these are going to be questions that people are going to ask when you're doing all of this kind of tracking stuff, are you tracking vocals with autotune on, printed on, and are you kind of doing it to a 2-track? I know that a lot of people always want to know, do you record to a 2-track and then put that into a mix session, or or tuning is a big one?
Okay, so first of all, in terms of recording to a 2-track or not a 2-track,
Yeah.
I prefer to have the track outs if
Okay.
possible. I don't have any effects on the track outs. I just have a good balance of it. And if
Yeah.
I have time, I'll even do a balance where whatever the vocalist is connecting with, I can kind of like nudge that up a little bit and
Okay.
level just so they hear that a little better. If
Yeah.
they need a little bit of help with the rhythm, let's nudge the snare up, maybe take that guitar down so they're hearing the rhythm a little better.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's why I like to have track outs, but I would say 90% of the time I'm usually working to a 2-track, which is fine. It's the general idea of what the record is going to sound like at the end of the day, so there's benefits there.
Yeah.
Tracking through autotune, I would say that is a commitment thing.
Yeah.
So if you know that you're doing a style where autotune is going to be part of the sound, you absolutely 100% always want to be tracking through autotune because you want to hear the end result of that. If you don't do that, you might find that the autotune does some things that you weren't expecting it to do based on the dry takes.
Yeah.
However, if you're doing a style where the auto tune or any kind of pitch editing is meant to be a little bit more subtle, like maybe fool the end listener into thinking that, wow, this singer really just has an unbelievable center of pitch, then you probably don't want to track through auto tune because
Yeah.
I would end up doing manual pitch correction using revoice as opposed to autotune, or perhaps using revoice and then putting autotune down at like 100 millisecond retune speed, which is very, very slow comparatively,
Yeah.
just so that it's like ever so subtly taking the already corrected and fixed vocals and just pulling them ever so slightly into center without really creating any artifact.
Interesting. Yeah, no, it's so great to hear kind of your workflow, because that's always something that pops up, like, do I, track vocals with tuning? Do I not, do it after? And it's interesting what you're saying. Do you not use Melodyne? You're on Revoice, you said, for manual kind of correction, or?
Yeah, I love
Yeah.
Melodyne. I used
Yeah.
Melodyne for years. Then I
Yeah.
started playing around with Revoice, and for what I was looking for, Revoice was doing the job a little bit faster.
Okay. And just because I don't use I use Melodyne, but it's similar, is it? So you can record, so you'd put the vocal in and then you'd just manually kind of go through it, and you would do that before autotune or after autotune, depending on what you were doing. Is that?
So if it's like if this is something like Con where that's like a
Yeah.
very auto-tune style, like an
Yeah.
EDM kind of record where it's an auto-tune style, something like that, I
Yeah.
would use repitch in the DAW in
Right.
order to
Yeah.
get everything kind of in place so that it acts with whatever kind of automated pitch correction, like autotune, or not always autotune, sometimes Slate Metatune is good.
Yeah.
Um, and just getting that interaction to function the way that I want. But I'm actually it's like I'm mixing into it. I'm editing into the
Yeah.
pitch correction so that I can get the glitchiness that I want or lack of glitchiness that I want.
I see.
But
Okay.
if
Yeah.
I'm doing something where it's more like a singer-songwriter kind of thing or an R&B thing that's not meant to sound so auto-tuney or something like that, I'm gonna pull the vocals in with a 2-track into Revoice Pro completely separately because I've got a lot more control over that, and that becomes its own session.
Yeah.
This is what I'm hired to be doing, like, really serious vocal production.
Yeah.
That's a session, and so that might be 2, 3 hours of actually, like, going through every single word, syllable,
Yeah.
etc. The reason why the big selling thing for me for Revoice, which again is no shade to Melodyne because I do love that program, but it's the automatic alignment thing
Yeah.
that because you can't do that in other programs, and so being able to taking that time to shift everything, time stretch, go through every
Yeah.
line,
Yeah.
and then do that over like 16 stacks of harmonies or
Takes a
whatever.
long time.
It takes a long time. In Revoice, you do that with one operation, all 16 harmonies. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
it's just
okay.
bam, 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 and that's such a unbelievable time saver.
If you are doing then, like, a singer-songwriter style track, and you are going through it manually, I mean, I know a lot of people, they'll go through it manually in Melodyne, and then they'll put autotune just on top just to catch anything that was kind of maybe a bit loose. Do you ever do that, or do you just use Revoice and then that's it? You wouldn't use Slate kind of tuning on top or autotune or anything? I mean, of course it would depend, but just talking generally speaking, is it kind of like one or the other for you, like automatic or manual, or bit of
No, no,
both?
you can use both. I think,
Yeah.
with the more transparent stuff, you just wanna watch your retune speeds. So,
Yeah.
a typical retune speed on, like, a modern pop R&B kinda thing might be anywhere from, like, maybe 5 milliseconds up to, like, 20 milliseconds.
Yeah.
But if you're doing something that's supposed to feel a little bit more honest, the retune speed, don't be afraid to set the retune speed down to 70 milliseconds, 100 milliseconds, maybe even slower sometimes, because most of the effort that you're doing, most of the work is happening at Revoice and some or whatever you're using. And sometimes you don't need both. And that really just depends on how solid and trained the singer is, especially at like the extremes of their voice.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. So when you're kind of then, you've done the recording and, obviously the tuning's part of the editing and all of that. Are you doing all of the nudging and all of that kind of with the artist in the session during doing the comping takes, or is that again another whole separate session where you'll do nudging completely down, like, later down the line?
Oh, no, we're always fixing timing in the session.
Yeah.
And actually, with Revoice, one of the other things that I like about it is if we're laying in harmonies and things like that, I can also do the pitch correction. Like you can just highlight everything, double click, and if the singer is pretty good,
Yeah.
then it'll just snap to it.
Yeah.
So, I'm rendering as much of the edit as possible, and timing is an extremely important one. So yeah,
Yeah.
300 sample nudges back and forth while the recording is happening for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah. Timing's huge. I spend hours on it. It's getting it, perfect to get it right in the pocket. It's interesting actually because I saw a video not too long ago. I can't remember if someone sent it to me or I saw it, and it was you, and it was getting vocals to be in the pocket, and it was the difference between hearing it with it, and it was it's so true. And anybody listening to this episode now, like, really time your vocals, because it doesn't matter how good you mix it, if the timing is off, it can throw you completely. And it's interesting.
So I not to shamelessly plug, but to shamelessly plug, I just put out a tutorial through Produce Like a Pro, and it's a 4-part tutorial series. But in one of the parts, I'm doing an R&B record, and the first segment is a 30-minute segment. When I got the record, I realized the timing of the vocals hadn't been fixed; they were off. So the first 30 minutes of that tutorial is a really in-depth look at how to hear timing, what to listen for, how to fix it, and how you know when it's right. Which, it doesn't sound like the most exciting topic, but I'm going to tell you right now, if no matter how good your EQ, compression, and reverb skills are, the best you're going to be able to do is mask timing problems. But there is nothing better than getting the feel of that timing in the pocket right. It's like you could leave the vocal sounding sloppy as hell, but if that timing is right, it's still going to feel like it belongs. It's really one of the most underappreciated aspects of getting a vocal to be correct.
Yeah. Definitely go and get that course, anybody listening, because when I saw that little the video you did, I can't remember how long it was. It wasn't too long, but it was enough to be like, that is so key in any mixing. Like what you just said, it doesn't matter what plugins you got, whether you're using an amazing reverb or outboard, if that timing is on to the point where it's great, then it's going to be a lot easier, down the line than if it isn't. So talking about yourself then, when, if you get sessions in where you're not recording the vocals and it's just, purely a mix session, is your approach... I mean, we can do two things. We can get technical about your approach to mixing when you're recording the vocals and how that is different from when you're getting sent vocals. So shall we kind of talk about first your kind of process of, okay, once you've recorded the vocals and, you're now going into your mix session, what's kind of your workflow from start to kind of finish, in like a brief kind of way, with a session that you've recorded? If we can go into that, it'd be fantastic.
So for the stuff that I record, I do pull it into a new session. I now have a mix template. My friend Keith Ross helped me out with that. I was not using a template for a very long time. And then he sort of showed me some of the things where a template could really help out. So I started putting some of the common things that I do into loading up these auxes and things like that. And it actually really has not just made my workflow go faster, but also it's improved the end result. I was kind of one of those like purists to be like, no, every record has to be touched completely uniquely. And then but having a template doesn't actually eliminate that sensibility. It actually makes it easier. So I do pull into a template session. I get the track outs. I then sync the track outs with the audio because for whatever reason, the track outs never seem to be the same arrangement or in the exact same timing as whatever the 2-track was. So we get that right. And then I do a refinement process where I start really kind of micromanaging things like pitch, timing, like almost like a quick editing session, which is usually not so quick if I didn't do the tracking myself. But the mix usually goes pretty quick because I'm kind of figuring out the direction for the mix as I'm doing the tracking session. Like I don't necessarily separate those entirely. So even if I'm doing the tracking session, I might be grabbing like, a 0 latency EQ or whatever and doing some EQ moves, adjusting some things. I also really like to do my delay throws while I'm tracking because sometimes I'll hear lines where I'll be like, I know I'm going to put a delay throw there. And it really makes the client happy when they sing their line and then the thing that they're imagining then just magically happens. You know what I mean? So
do you do your delay throws on a separate track, or do you do that as an aux send, as an automation?
I do it as an aux send, as an automation and touch automation. And the reason why I do that is because a lot of the times I'll use like H delay, which is a good sounding delay, but a lot of the times I'll swap it out for something that's a little bit quirkier. Not necessarily because anybody in the end is going to care, but mostly because I just have this desire to experiment.
Yeah, no, I just had to ask you that because I just know that from a technical point of view, people are going to be like, "Oh, does Matt do it like that? Or does he do it like that?" So it's great to kind of confirm that's the way you do it. It's interesting how everyone does it.
I'm glad you're asking because I'm moving through things and talking very quickly, so a lot of things can get lost.
I'm loving it. So keep going. Yeah.
So when I'm
Yeah.
getting in a session from somebody else, that's where the gloves come off. And as we can see,
That's when it gets stressful.
yeah, this is from beating up a tracking engineer. Um, it's not. I would never. But a lot of the times, tracking engineers, either because they don't know they need to do this or because they're scared to do this kind of stuff, they don't take the role on as vocal producer. And by the way, for anybody who's like an in-house engineer or whatever, don't pay attention to anybody online who says the tracking engineer's job is this, the producer's job is that, the mix. Everybody's job is to do the best they can with the skill set they have. Period.
Love that.
So, if you think that you can help a vocalist along, take the risk. Be thoughtful about, be careful, but take the risk. And then when it comes to nudging timing and things like that, I would say if you've got an ear for timing, just do it. If you've got an ear for pitch correction, just do it. The big mistake I think people make is they have these templates that they've downloaded online that has like 60 plugins on everything. And so that creates this sound that sounds horrible. I don't know why they think it sounds good, but I guess because they think, oh, maybe this is what good sound is, or they're not in a good monitoring environment.
Yeah.
All that stuff goes off. And then I usually end up having to do a more complex editing session, which takes longer. And I do bill the client additionally for that because it ends up being an extra hour to 3 hours of work potentially.
Yeah.
But then I get it to a point where I sort of think like, well, if I had tracked it, what would have happened? And that also includes signal processing. So I'll do like EQ, compression, tune, and then commit that right off the bat to be like, what would this have sounded like had I tracked it? And then I would go from there and do my mix.
So you commit. That's interesting.
Yes.
So you commit processing. So if you get an independent artist, let's say, send you a track that that you haven't recorded, you've had nothing to do with, they're just, hiring you to mix it. You go through and you approach it as you would track the vocal, and you commit EQ, compression, and then tuning like an analog gear, like you're going through. Interesting. That's really,
1,000%. If you
yeah,
ever see a situation where I have like every insert on my Pro Tools just completely populated, it's one of two things are happening. Either one, I'm demonstrating the first 4 things or 3 things are things that I would have done in the tracking phase that never would have been plugins. They would have been a top end boost off of the 1073. They would have been having a compressor in line. I track with a compressor usually. All that kind of stuff that means you wouldn't have to have those plugins later on because the sound is much more close to finished. Or the other thing that I'm doing is I'm doing something that's more sound design oriented, where I'm reshaping the sound in a way that would be less predictable. And so there's a lot of weird stuff going on.
Do you do a lot of RXing as well? Are you into all of that stuff, mouth declick or all of that, or do you manually do it? Or
I usually do it manually with RX. So yes, I do.
Yeah.
I go through, I'll either delete the breaths or I'll do Command E, double click, and then what is it, Control, and then I have a jog wheel, so I just
Yeah.
go like this, and it goes. The gain on the clip just drops down
Love
like
it.
13 dB.
Yeah.
I manually DS sometimes. I eliminate clicks and pops as I hear them. Yeah, that shit's a pain in the ass, but that's what you got to do.
Yeah. I think it's kind of basically not be lazy, go through that editing process, because I've seen it before where I'm a bit like you in the sense of I want my tracks to be completely clean before I then start applying kind of mixing process on it, because all it's going to do is just enhance all of the issues. And sometimes you see
Yeah.
sessions with mixers on it, it's like if they just went through the pops and the clicks and the breaths before they put a load of compression on, it would have changed a lot. So it's great stuff, and I think anybody listening to that, please do take that advice from Matt on that.
Also, something I'm doing while I'm tracking, clip gain. So like if one line comes in a little quieter than the line, like let's say somebody does a punch and they
Yeah.
want to catch the rest of the line, but they do it a little bit louder than the other first bit of the line was. I've manually doing my gain, clip gain on
Yeah.
that segment so it matches. I'm not waiting for the mix to do that. If a take is great, but there's a breath in it, I'm going to either eliminate that breath or I'm going to just reduce the breath depending on the feel of the record right then and there. I'm not going to wait for somebody else to have to, because I might not be mixing it. I don't want somebody else to get my session and be like, why are the clicks and breaths and mouth noises all over this shit? Is this person an amateur? Because that's the
Yeah.
feeling that you get when you have
Yeah.
to like go through and start like getting rid of clicks and shit.
Yeah.
It's like, did the tracking engineer do anything besides hit the record button? Yeah.
So true. Going actually a little bit talking about that tracking part, actually, one thing that has popped up before that people do seem to ask a lot is kind of gain staging. That seems to be, you know, a big topic that, you know, people seem to find it a little bit hard to understand sometimes, or they're just a bit unsure. And talking about kind of, you know, when you mentioned about clip gain and, you know, it kind of suddenly realized about all the gain staging, are you, I assume you are obviously doing some sort of gain staging during the recording process. Are you then, you know, can you talk a little bit about your gain staging in the recording, and then when you are preparing it for mixing, is it like a certain numbers that you want to hit in your template that you've created, you know, all of that sort of stuff, or do you just feel it?
No, so in the tracking phase, so first of all, we got to understand what gain staging actually means. Gain staging is the interaction of analog componentry. It's not levels. It's very misunderstood. In the old days, back when I was young, and things were being done in an analog way, you had to contend with two things at the extremes of level: your noise floor at the quiet part and your headroom at the top, meaning where your actual componentry will start to distort. They can no longer handle any more voltage, and so it turns into clipping. So when you're gain staging, you are managing your level between noise floor and distortion. You want to be as far away from the noise floor as possible with as little problematic distortion as possible, and finding that sweet spot. Most of the time, that's happening somewhere in the range of what we call the nominal operating level of your gear. Nominal operating level by standard is 1 volt, but it doesn't have to be. You then have gear that has very clean headroom and then you have gear that has dirty headroom, and then you have fun gear where it has clean headroom until it has dirty headroom. And sometimes dirty headroom sounds good, like if you click in the second amp stage on a Neve.
Yeah.
That sounds horrible on a vocal usually, but it sounds really cool on an upright bass. So you're managing your distortions and your signal level and everything like that. Now, do I gain stage? Absolutely. I want to make sure that I'm getting a signal in that sounds correct, and making sure that the management of my levels across my multiple pieces of gear, especially if I'm doing console work, is going to be in that sweet spot where the noise floor is imperceptible and the distortion is either imperceptible or the kind of distortion I want. Okay. That explanation aside, there is kind of a digital gain staging, but it's really more like level management. You don't have a noise floor, and your headroom is infinite until it's absolutely zero.
Yeah.
There's nothing different between -1 and -60. Nothing. Until you get to 0. Once you hit 0 dB full scale, then you have infinite clipping right away. So it's a very different kind of mindset. But when you set up a template, like a mix template, my mix template does have sort of expected levels that it wants to see. Now, the very specific level of it is fairly unimportant. I usually just go off of like, okay, are my signals generally tapping into the light green, where the green stops and the light green begins? That's where my template is happy. But it's set up in a way where it almost works more like a console. You push into the various chains that are there, and then you just listen and go, okay, is this giving me what I want? Sometimes you push in harder and it gives you a fatter sound. Sometimes you push in less hard, it gives you a slightly cleaner, crisper sound. And so that's not exactly gain staging, but it's kind of similar, I
Like
guess.
level management.
It's more like level management, yeah.
But
But
that was a great kind of way of putting it.
yeah, I will say this though: the redder the better is definitely not good. That's BS completely, especially if you happen to be using interface preamps. So for anybody listening who's using an Apollo, an Apogee Duet, a Focusrite Scarlett, any kind of standalone interface that is both converters and preamps, do not push to the red. Do not go to the top of your meter. You want to drive those preamps as little as possible. If you're just tapping into the light green, if your management levels are coming in like minus 18 dB full scale, you're in a good place. Do not
Yeah.
overpress those preamps. They do not drive well. They sound bad. They comb filter in on themselves sometimes, and the top end gets real grainy real fast.
And if you get to minus 18 dBFS, a lot of the plugins, if you know on the manual and the plugins, it will be like the perfect point is, you know, that minus 18.
And there's a reason for that. It's because that spec of your converters is usually around minus 18 to minus 22 dBFS yields 1 volt across your system, which is the standard nominal operating level for most
Very
of your
technical
analog gear. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you get then, so now we've kind of gone through the gain staging of, you know, that when you then bring it into your you know, Pro Tools, are you within your template that you've set up, are you kind of doing a top down mixing? Are you going into a mix bus and well, are you going into do you do the whole mix bus approach and mix into that?
I don't.
Okay.
But I have my things that I like to use on my mix bus there,
Yeah.
but they're inactive.
Okay.
I do want to say there are a lot of people who mix into a mix bus. They have a compressor or an EQ or something like that, and they mix into it, and they do a phenomenal job. I'm losing my voice. Sorry.
Take your time.
They do a phenomenal job of mixing into their mix bus. They get fantastic results. I am not one of those people. It's a preference thing. I do have certain chains that are set up and ready to go, but those are kind of more like processing chains for if and when I need them.
And going back, obviously, to your levels, you know that those plugins that you have inactive on Pro Tools are going to be sitting around a point where you want them because you've kind of done your leveling management of your files before they've gone in. So, which I assume is that's kind of why you want it to be kind of all level management. So, you know, you can just activate those plugins, and obviously you're going to have to adjust it, I would assume, to fit the track, but you know that it's going to hit those plugins at that kind of point where you're happy with it.
Yeah, I mean, people have asked me for my template and things like that, and I don't sell a template. People have said you should sell your template, and like the problem is my template is very personal to my workflow.
Yeah,
and the whole point of a template is to construct something that makes sense for how you work. So unless a video came along with it explaining exactly how to use the template, and then the problem with that is then I'm telling you how to do your work, and I don't think that that's really helpful. I think that just. I mean, it can be, but it's really the better thing is to figure out how you like to work and what works for you, I think.
Yeah, and kind of make your own template, I guess, you know, for yourself that works.
Yeah.
You know, works for you. So when it comes down to then, you know, processing, you know, as we discussed vocals, I guess with the recording, we might as well talk about it within the technical mixing stage of it. When we talk, you know, when you are approaching mixing vocals, obviously you mentioned that that you already set up kind of your analog, the way that you would do it if you weren't recording it, you'd set up your analog EQs and compressions. What's kind of your go-to kind of mixing plugin chain, if you have one, like a go-to kind of chain to process vocals?
Yeah,
because I love your vocal sounds.
Thank you.
You seem to always get them great.
I focus, because of the work that I do, it's more important for me to focus on vocals than it is to focus on other things. A lot of the times with rhythmic music, which is the bulk of what I do, the producers are so good and so specific about what they want that their tracks require very, very little processing. I do a little bit sometimes, but really it's more about knowing what not to do and respecting the producer's decisions. The vocal, on the other hand, that's still an acoustic element, and that's going to require some temping. So I use a bunch of stuff, different things for different purposes. I would say my go-to number one thing that I'm starting with is the AMIC 9099 from Plugin Alliance.
Great, love that.
Yeah. And a very, very, very specific reason, too. It's the best sounding notch filters that you'll ever hear. And when there's like weird resonances from like the control room or the ISO or wherever you're tracking, and you want to get rid of it transparently, you know, no shade to Fab Filter, but that notch filter is greasy. I hear the phase problems very clearly. The AMIC one, Don't hear any issues with it. So it's like that tank filter that they're using,
Yeah.
unbelievably well programmed. If you have that plugin, by the way, anything that says MW in front of it is one of my presets. I would ignore all of the presets, frankly, except for the one that says all buttons off. So I start with that preset because for
Yeah.
whatever reason, when you open that plugin, there's like settings that are on.
Yeah.
And it's like, why? It's a channel strip. No, get rid of that. Let's start from that. And then, it also has it's just generally good sounding. So I can do a little bit of like, rolling off some lows, extending the highs,
Yeah.
managing a little bit of the upper mid, like all in the EQ, gating out any kind of extra noise if I need to, whatever it might be. The compressors are a little finicky in that. I don't use the compressors a ton. I use them, but I don't rely on them so much. For compression, I find that my parallel chains are usually better. I might use the FabFilter Pro C2 to just like kind of mold it into place, but usually from there, I'm pushing into either a parallel LA2A from Overloud or what are some of the other good ones? The Colin from Analog Obsession
Oh yeah. Yeah.
is really, really cool. So sometimes in 1176, if it's something that's supposed to be a little edgier sounding, again, Gem Overloud 1176, that's my preference.
Are you doing all of that parallel? So they're not on your actual kind of insert. You're putting them to a bus and you're actually driving them in of parallel. Okay,
Yes.
interesting. Yeah.
And lately, I've been working without those parallel chains in pre-fader. I've been doing it just, post-fader so that if I push the vocal up, it pushes into the parallel chain more, which is kind of a no-no. You're not really supposed to do it that way because once
Yeah.
you've got the sound of your parallel chain, you want it to generally stay the same. But I've actually been finding that it's a little bit more musical for me to manage my levels that way.
Interesting. Yeah.
That's more of a like do as I say, not as I do kind of thing. I wouldn't recommend that to most people.
Yeah.
And then from there, I might do a little bit more EQ sculpting with like the Waves Q10. I use that all the time because it can be anything I want it to be. And then I would say from there, I get into my reverbs and delays typically.
Are you one of those guys that kind of uses multiple reverbs to get a reverb sound, or are you kind of quite simple in the sense of kind of your effects? I know you mentioned about delay throws, but if you're talking, let's say reverb, do you have like a broad plate, or do you have reverbs that come in at different times? Of course, that will be dependent on the song, but just in
Oh,
general.
I'm a lunatic with reverbs.
Yeah.
I'm a mess. I'm so inspired by Tom Elmhurst and everything that he does with reverbs, and I want that so bad. And what Serban does with changing the reverbs from place to place. So I'll have like 6 reverb returns, like just an absolutely obscene, you know what I mean? And then I'll ride them in and out at times. And a lot of the reverbs I use also come with my own presets because I'm super cool. So
what reverbs are you using?
So my standard reverbs are my Bricasti M7, my
a real one.
A real one.
Oh, nice.
Although the Slate Verb Suite Classic is a very good emulation, and Seventh Heaven.
That's what I use. Yeah, not as
Heaven
good as the real one.
Yeah, I mean, well, and that's why I didn't end up getting Seventh Heaven, because like, well, okay, but I've got a real one here, so I mean,
exactly.
You know what I mean? So I used that.
Yeah.
I have 2 other reverbs that I don't keep in part of my template, but they both exist if I need them. One is an Eventide. The other one is a spring reverb called a Room Master or a Master Mix. What the heck is it? Mic Mix Audio Room 305 spring reverb.
Yeah,
it's really cool.
Nice.
And definitely has its place, but it's like a very specific sound. And then my other ones in the template are Native Instruments ROM, which do not sleep on that reverb. It is really cool. And then the 2 Relab reverbs, the LX480L and the Quant X.
Yeah. Nice. That's a lot of reverbs.
I have so many reverb. Like, dude, if I had the money for it, I would just have a wall of reverbs, and like I would have no other signal processing at all, just like a wall of reverbs. I'm a reverb junkie.
So with all of these different boxes, obviously, like the Bricasti's got multiple settings on it. Like, do you have like a plate, a hall, like you said, mentioned spring, or are you changing that all the time?
No, I have typical ones that I go to. I use St. Gerald's Hall for a hall pretty often. I use London Plate and the Sun Plate for my plates pretty often. In the
Yeah,
weird section, there's like Waving Bloom, which is fun, and Concert Wave, which is
yeah,
fun.
yeah,
That shimmering sky thing is cool, but I never like it. I'm always like, that's really cool, but it's not going to fit.
yeah.
Uh, the Sunset Chamber
Oh,
is
that's I use
good.
that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sunset Chamber's great. Do you with vocals though in particular, like a lead vocal? Again, it will depend on what song you're doing. Do you find that you go more towards a play or more towards a hall? Because some people are like halls only, some people are like plates. Kind of. Do you have like a a go to that you use more in your mix than any other?
It depends on a few things. It
Yep.
depends on if I'm trying to create a realistic environment or not.
Yep.
That's a big deal in terms of how I'm even gonna think about my reverbs at all.
Yeah.
It also depends on where I want the vocal to sit in the front to back image.
Yeah.
Like, if I want my vocals to be really forward but still have a reverb, I'm pretty much always gonna go for a plate. Uh, there is a unique quality to plates where all the high frequencies come up front and all the low frequencies come later, and there's something about that that allows the vocal to feel like it pops.
Yeah.
And so almost always going for plates in that regard. Plus, a plate doesn't have a realistic sense of boundary. So if I have room tones or other reverbs, it tends to get along a little bit nicer. But
Yeah.
if I want something, if I'm doing like a Lumineers style thing where I want somebody to sound like they're in a room in a bar or something like that, then I'm absolutely going for rooms. And
Yeah.
I'm being a little bit more naturalistic with the way I'm approaching it. Um,
Yeah.
and then there's another side of it too, which is, there's a plate, but you can make a if you're working with algorithms, it's not a plate, a room, or a hall, or a chamber. It's an algorithm.
Yeah.
That's what you're actually hearing. You're hearing the algorithm, no matter what. The settings are just trying to make the algorithm act more like what we're pretending it to be.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you can go and get a chamber and you can adjust it to make it act more like a plate. And there will be times where that makes a lot of sense because let's say you have a thin vocal and it's not for anything besides the vocalist is just, slightly thin in their voice. Like those sunset chambers are great for that. Sometimes I want them to act a little bit more like the plate. So I'll change the high damping around and I'll change the early reflections and things like that to make it act more like, say, the sunset plate, but it has that modulated low mid quality that kind of beefs up
Yeah.
underneath
Yeah.
the vocal. So it's also kind of like a signal processor in the way that it affects the perception of the dry vocal.
Yeah, yeah. No, interesting. No, yeah, I'm going to try that because I always find I put like the sunset chamber reverb and then I'll put an EQ, maybe some tape saturation as well if I want to kind of make it a bit more gritty. So obviously it would depend on the song, but no, it's interesting what you're saying about they're all kind of algorithms in the sense of yeah, they're so true they are. But I've always thought about it like no, these are my halls, these are my plates. But you're saying change your plate to a hall if you want to, if you like that kind of thing for that certain thing.
Yeah,
Which is interesting. Yeah.
another good way to think about it is there's going to be more of a difference in sound between a Bricasti and a Lexicon than
Yeah.
there's going to ever be between a Bricasti set one way versus a Bricasti set a different way.
Interesting. Yeah.
It will still sound the same in terms of what that reverb generally sounds like.
Yeah. Okay.
So
Yeah. No, it's interesting. Yeah. Yeah. That's cool to get your perspective on that. I mean, and then when it comes down to like delays, are you a guy that uses kind of doublers, delays? Yeah, I know you mentioned, you use delays as well, but you see some people's vocal chains and it's very simple and it's like, they've got reverb, and then you see other people that have got reverb, delays, doublers. Do you do all of that as well? Do you add doublers and delays and all of that sort of stuff in your vocal chains a lot?
yeah, I use doublers on leads maybe about 50% of the time. I use doublers on backing vocals maybe about 80% of the time.
Yeah.
Um, or some kind of a modulation or chorusing kind of an effect to just make it feel a little bit more dense.
Yeah.
Uh, it's so I do play it by ear. With delays, I usually consider my delay part of my reverb design. So I might have a delay, I might not have a delay that's kind of acting in the background in conjunction with the reverb, and very oftentimes is feeding into the reverbs.
Yeah.
So that's a really good trick for getting something to feel like it has a ton of reverb on it without making it feel like it's swamped in reverb at the same time.
Yeah.
You tuck a little eighth note ping pong or something like that, or an eighth note mono underneath, and then send that to the reverb, and it adds
Pushes
that
it.
reverb without
Yeah.
putting it on the vocal.
Yeah.
But then there's that, and then there's my use of delays as like one-time events. So like,
Yeah.
somebody says a word and it replies back to them,
Yeah.
or something like that. And for that, it could be, I actually print them on audio tracks because there will be like a whole section of my DAW dedicated to like one-time events.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's the amount of things that are happening are just absolutely obscene.
Interesting. No, I mean, we're you mentioned there about, backing vocals as well. One thing actually I find interesting, and I've noticed a lot when I chat to a lot of other mixers, everyone seems to do things differently. I know some mixers that are like, I will put the same lead vocal chain, or not the same lead vocal chain, but similar plugins, and they will, let's say they've got a double, that harmony, and they're doing it in doubles, left and a right. They will not send it to a bus. They'll put it on an all vocal bus and copy and paste the chain left and then again on the right, so the compressor reacts as two kind of mono signals. And then other engineers I know go, nah, stick it in a bus and just do kind of everything as a bus. What's your approach to it, and what do you generally do in your mixing? Are you busing? I guess the simple question is are you busing a group of harmonies to a bus and processing the bus, or are you doing everything individually for the compressor or reverbs to react in a certain way in the mix?
I'm pushing on 40. I don't have that much time left. I'm doing it on the bus.
Yeah.
I'll tell you.
I love that.
Why. I'll tell you why. Because the way that I do my background vocals when they're stacked like that,
Yeah.
I'll send them to the bus and then I'll collapse it to mono. And when I do
Okay.
that, all of the resonances in the room, all of the tones that are populated inside the vocal performance, all of the weird stuff that might be going on that you might not notice in a single vocal suddenly is coupling in on itself and being exaggerated. So I want to hear what happens when all 16 of those vocals are folded on top of each other. What's starting to poke out? Oh, there's a ton of 400 hertz that I didn't think I needed to remove, but now that there's 1,000 vocals on top of each other, oh yeah, I guess I do. So it tells me more, and I get my EQ settings faster and better doing it that way. As soon as I flip it back out to stereo, boop, blends right in. Easy peasy.
Interested. I'm glad you do it like that, because I'm like, especially with CPU, I'm like, nah, if I've got 30 harmonies, they are going on a bus.
Yeah.
There's just no way I'm going to process 30 separate things. So no, I'm glad you're similar.
But with putting the compression on each individual one, in a way I do that. I use a dual mono, usually RVox actually, dual mono compression, so that the left is not triggering the right, because I want a consistent image across the board.
So you do dual mono compression on the bus?
Yes. So if the
yeah.
left side suddenly gets really loud, it only pulls down the left side and makes it even with the right. If we're using a stereo compressor, if the left side gets really loud, it's going to pull everything down and your image is still going to be lopsided.
Yeah, yeah. And do you always do that generally? Is that something, because dual mono on buses, whether it's like bus guitars, are you doing that across the board?
No, not on other instruments. I like, you don't want to do that on drums, for example, because drums have asymmetric imagery specifically. So if you're compressing your overheads, if you start using dual mono compression, you're going to collapse your image into the center.
Okay. Yeah.
No, this is very specific. Sometimes on guitars you might do it that way, but with guitar stacks, there's really, especially if I'm producing, usually each individual layer of the guitar is doing something a little different, as opposed to like background vocals where each individual layer is doing the same thing.
So you wouldn't necessarily bus guitars then as one and process as one. You do it all individually, because like you say, they're doing a different thing.
Yeah, I might bust them to I definitely bust them to a guitar bus, but I'm not doing as much of the processing on that. It's more for like general processing, whereas when I get to the individual guitar, it's going to be a little bit more personal for what that guitar is.
No, it's interesting. Yeah, because I find out I'll have like a guitar bus and do maybe some subtle EQ if there's a little bit of build up in 400 hertz. Just do it on the that kind of stuff. So no, it's interesting. Are you Are you a guy that uses clippers in the sense of, like limited, like clipper plugins? They seem to be more popular than ever. Do you use that a lot in your workflow?
Um, I've been using it for a while because I'm a Decapitator fan and have been using
Okay.
that. There used to be this thing maybe in like the early 2010s where it was like Decapitator everything, and that's how you make a mix,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
it's kind of true. Like, yeah, I mean, I use a lot of saturation,
yeah,
which is effectively a type of clipping.
yeah,
But when people are thinking of clipping, I think they're more thinking along the lines of like standard clip or the one that everybody's talking about now is gold clip. Um,
yeah. I
I
tried
use
that. That's a good plugin. I demoed that. It's good.
Yeah, there's a
Yeah,
couple new ones coming out too, which I'm interested in. But yeah,
yeah,
that's Schwab Digital, I think, makes that one.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. I find I just do clipping usually though on just a mix bus, but I know a lot of people do it on drum bass, vocals. But yeah, I was just curious if you're doing that at all
so
on yeah.
not so much on the mix bus. The reason being because I'm using Master Plan, and Master Plan is a combination limiter and clipper. So you can get your clipping. So yes, I am clipping on the mix bus, but I'm doing it specifically within the same plugin
Okay.
that's incorporating it in a really sharp way. Which again, that's about there's a gain staging sensibility to that plugin as
Yeah.
well. Uh, so yeah, there's a difference between having there's an input knob and a loud knob basically. There's a difference between having the input knob plus 6 dB versus having the loud knob plus 6 dB. Those don't sound the same.
Yeah.
So you get more clipping if you start driving the input.
Yeah.
Um, I do a lot of clipping on drums. I work with clippers, especially like if I'm doing like a parallel punch kind of a thing.
Yeah.
Um,
I guess just to tame
some
the peaks more than anything in that situation then, or is it more for saturation?
No, it's to manipulate the transient energy so that you're getting as much energy in the transient before it stops sounding like transient, if that makes
I
sense.
see.
You want
Yeah,
that
yeah,
punch to be as full and long as possible until the
yeah.
ear starts going, "That's not punch, that's sustain now." So,
Yeah.
clippers are really useful for that, and then I'll
Yeah.
use clippers for sound design, or if a vocal is already clipped or an acoustic element is already clipped, I will
Yeah.
find a way to either incorporate some clipping over the entire sound,
Yeah.
or I will clip something else to make the clipping sound more deliberate.
Okay. Interesting. That's cool. That's cool. So so are you so to kind of round this up then, I always have this question that I always ask every mixer that comes on. And it's a question, and the question is what three things do you know now in your career that you wish you knew when you were first starting out?
Oh, wow. I think there's a difference between knowing something and truly understanding something, because I think that there were a lot of things that I knew but
Yeah.
didn't really understand. The big one is that this business is a people business, and it's about making sure that those networks are really strong. The value in that is unreal, totally unreal. Um, I would say that's the number one thing, is just knowing that that network needs to be strong. The second thing would probably be really understanding that the artists and the producers that you work with, they're not engineers. They're not audio scientists with magical monitoring chains and things like that. They are not going to be able to differentiate between a good mix and a great mix most of the time. So the thing that really separates how your clients work with you is the experience that they have. That's a little bit of a tough pill to swallow sometimes, because you can make a mix. I've lost mixes where I can objectively say my mix was a lot better. And this has probably happened in reverse as well. And it's because the client can't tell, but maybe the client had a better experience with that other person, or felt like the interpretation that person took was better and more akin to what they were looking for. So understanding that side of it, I think, is really like internalizing that. It's like if you
Yeah.
reply to somebody's email quickly, it matters more maybe sometimes than whether or not you got that snare exactly perfect. You know what I mean?
So true. It's yeah.
And then, I think this again is something else that I've known, but never really internalized until more recently is that, make sure that the business stuff is really solid up front and clean and clear. Uh, because clients will walk all over you, and not even for the fact that they're bad people or whatever, or disrespectful people, but just for the fact that they don't know that even just popping open the DAW to make one tiny change is still effort and time,
Yeah.
and couples in on things, you know what I mean? So, and turnaround time expectations, because people will be like, well, how long could it possibly take to mix a record? Like a day? It's like, yeah, but I've got to get through like 7 or 8 other things. So
Yeah.
it's not that yours is going to take that long. It's that I have a queue. So just, being very clean and professional and clear up front, and being very specific about what things are going to cost, how many revisions are going to be free, what the revisions are going to cost if going otherwise. Don't change the production in the middle of the mix. If you do that, that is a new mix, or at
Yeah.
least will count as a revision. So you might get charged for that. Like, just, my turnaround time is 10 business days, like whatever it's going to be. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, it's really good you mentioned about the business part because, yeah, we get a lot of questions about, people always wanting to know from other mixers, how to set rates. I mean, it's a whole nother, thing, but it's like how to set rates, delivery time, how to deliver mixes, best way of doing things. So, getting that business in order is really, I think, like what you said, more key to having a successful career at mixing than it is necessarily just being the best mixer. Because if you've got no people skills or business skills, you're not going to
Doesn't
last long
matter
in the
how good you
industry.
are. Yeah, it
Yeah,
doesn't matter. You can be the best. In fact, I will guarantee you the best engineer in the world is probably some like 25-year-old off in their basement somewhere, just
yeah.
phenomenal ear, has no idea how to interact with people. Will never have a record
Yeah.
because of that.
So, I mean, just last actually, because the business thing I know is popular. Like, is there any advice, anybody that's listening to this now, kind of starting out from a business perspective of, I guess, the number one is everyone's always saying how to get clients. Do I need management? Do I not need management? Would you mind just giving us a little bit, of your view on that? Like, how important would you say the best way in a sense? I know it's a bit of a loose-ended question to kind of ask, so tell people how they can get work, but is there any advice you would give someone that in 2024 to be a mixer, how what steps they should take to put themselves in the best situation to either get work or get a manager, if you feel like a manager is important in the business that we do?
I'll talk about managers in a second, because
Yep.
managers are important, but not in the way that people think.
Yep.
Um, So the advice that I usually give to people who are starting out and just like, how do you get work? How do you make your way in this business? It's a 2-step process. Get really fucking good at what you do. Make sure everybody fucking knows, right? That's it. That's the
YouTube,
general
that helps.
equation. Get
Yeah.
good, make
Yeah.
sure people know. You don't want everybody to know and you suck. That's bad. You don't want to be really great, but nobody knows. That's bad. Get really good, make sure everybody knows. In terms of getting the ball rolling, it's more important to have the client than to have the money. So, always ignore online advice. Online advice is almost terrible. Obviously, this is the exception. The only singular exception is the Ed Stokes podcast. Everything else is crap.
Appreciate
Um,
it.
Ignore the online advice where they say, "Oh, don't dumb down your rates. Don't you know what I mean? No, get the work. Do free work. It's fine when you're getting started. Do free work. Make those connections with people. You need practice. You need experience. You need exposure to the client base. So do work for free. When that starts becoming problematic, do the you just have to buy me lunch rule, which is sometimes when you do something for free, people will take that to mean you have no value. So then you have to start establishing value, and you say, yeah, I'll do it, but you got to buy me lunch, but I'll do it. You know what I mean? And they'll always say yes. And you start building, and then you start charging, and you charge what you can get. If you can only charge $100 a mix, forget all of these people who are like, oh, you're undervaluing the industry. Don't worry about them. Okay. Worry about you. Charge your $100 an hour, then work your way up, build that client base. As your client base builds and your credits build, and over time they start to become more successful, some of your clients might start having bigger records, which helps you get your name around, and your rates come up. And then that cycle continues, and it's a marathon, not a sprint. So that's my advice for building that client base, but don't expect to get it overnight. There are things you can do to accelerate it by like, showing what you do through social media platforms. You do something cool with a mix, whatever, you take a little quick clip of it and put it on Instagram. That can be nice for helping that process along. But
Yeah.
ultimately, it's about just being consistent and doing that forever and ever and ever and ever
Has
and building
YouTube
it that
helped?
way.
Has YouTube helped you a lot in your career doing all of your, your breakdowns and tutorials and stuff?
Not in terms of pulling a client base, but it has helped by becoming another system of revenue, which has helped me to be more decisive in terms of what I wanted to do. So when I
Interesting.
was on the other channel and I was pulling in income from that, it was a significant amount. I was able to save up about 30K. So when I went to Los Angeles, I went there with a plan. I
Yeah.
said, I've got money saved up. I am going to rent a facility. It is going to be my facility. And then I'm going to start going back to that old school process of making sure that no matter what, people are in the door. I dragged some of my producer friends out there, some of my writer friends who were already there. I said, look, off hours, come into the studio and create. You
Yeah.
do not have to pay me. If you use my water, replace the water bottles, please. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. Love that. Yeah, yeah.
I gave a couple people codes. I had the little app on my phone so I could watch the cameras to make sure like nothing crazy was happening.
Yeah, yeah.
But I just made sure that people were coming into the studio. And that is ultimately how I ended up linking with the Convict team. So it was still that mentality of just being with the people as much as possible. But,
Yeah.
I wouldn't have done it on a whim and a prayer. I came with a plan and some finances that were helped by YouTube.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting because I feel like it's YouTube. I mean, I know it's been going for a long time, but I do feel like in 2024, social media is getting bigger than ever, and I feel like you can really make a great mixing career. I feel like from doing a lot of educational things like what you're doing, with the courses as well and all of that sort of stuff. It's a really good kind of way of doing it. And just lastly, you mentioned as well about management. If we can just touch upon that, and then that'll be it for this episode. But I'd be interested to hear your thought on that because you mentioned it and it's interesting.
So I've worked with a number of managers and I still do. Uh, there is a guy named Hiro Oshima who has been my manager off and on for years, depending on the circumstances. But I think people confuse what a manager is supposed to do. A manager is not really supposed to find you work. Sometimes they do that, but in California, it's actually technically not legal. Even you need an agent to find you work. A manager is not supposed to do that. That doesn't apply as much to music, but that's certainly true in film. A manager is supposed to manage what you have, not get you what you have. So if, for example, I'm working on, let's say I'm doing content stuff, having somebody who manages and negotiates my rates and makes sure that the connections and the companies that I'm working with are consistently in the loop with me, that allows me to free up my time to be doing the actual mixing work. And frankly, if it wasn't for the people that were helping me in those regards, I would be too torn between my time because I am full-time mixing and then also trying to do content. And then it's not just like I'm mixing records and I'm filming content. I have to figure out the content that it's going to be. I have to be interfacing with any of the people who might be sponsoring it. That interfacing can require several emails, phone calls, back and forths. You know what I mean? The mixing side of things, it's the same thing with the clients, right? You can have hours of discussion with a client before you ever touch a fader, and that's part of the work. So when you have a manager, you don't need to worry about that stuff nearly as much. You can
Yeah.
just have them handle it, and that's the benefit. And then it also will open up the doors to the connections in terms of like what else they're managing, who else they know. So I have a business manager named Eric Papp, and he used to run Summit Audio. He knows everyone in the world. So if I need to get in touch with somebody or I'd like to try and make a move or something like that, I can contact him and he can help me out by putting me in touch with the people I need to be in touch with.
Amazing. Amazing. That's great to hear all that because I think a lot of people, like what you mentioned, people think, oh, I'm going to get a manager and then I'm just going to sit and relax and have all the
No.
work come to me. And
It's
it's
actually it's the opposite because
yeah.
when you first get a manager, you have to manage the manager.
Interesting.
Yeah,
I
no, and
love
a
it.
manager is not going to find you work if you don't already have work.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, Matt, thank you so much for coming on. I mean, if you can please say kind of your social media handles, I will leave them all in the descriptions below everywhere. But if if anybody wants to contact you for a mix, what's the best way of getting to you and all of that sort of stuff? And of course, mention your course as well, that I know you mentioned earlier as well.
Okay, let's go in order here. So
Yeah.
Instagram handle @Weiss Sound with 3 S's in the middle because I'm bad at social media. So WEISSSOUND. That's my IG. To book me for a mix, matt@weiss-sound.com. Hope that's not too tough to remember. In terms of my tutorials, so there are 2 things going on. First of all, there's always weissadvice.com. Weiss Advice is a Web3 style educational platform where you join a Discord. There are weekly webinars. You interface directly with me. In addition to getting access to all of my pre-recorded tutorials, you will actually get live in-person tutorials where you can ask questions. We can work on material that you've been working on. You can put things into the Discord, all that kind of stuff. I think that's the future, and that's the direction I really have always wanted to go. And in particular, I have a tutorial series that I just put out through Produce Like a Pro, which is Warren Hewitt's channel. That is on mixing what we now call rhythmic music. Used to be called urban music, but it's basically music that's derived from dance music and hip hop. So in the course series, it's hip hop, R&B, dance pop, and rhythmic pop. So that's the 4 that I chose to do for this. That's through Produce Like a Pro, or you could go to the Pro Mix Academy, which is part of Produce Like a Pro. So I just threw a ton of stuff at everybody for that. So hopefully it'll be in text somewhere.
Exactly. It will be amazing. And as I say, anybody that's listening, please do go ahead and get those courses. Matt's a fantastic mixer. I've seen a lot of his videos on YouTube, and it's amazing. It's really nice to see someone explain things in a way that's actually understanding. So I just want to point that out as well. But Matt, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. And it was a fantastic episode. So thank you so much.
Hey, I was stoked to be here.
Love it. Thank you.